My work plays with the validity of occurrence and memory, with the starting point as a set of appropriated photo albums. Their contents have been deconstructed, rearranged, and juxtaposed with fresh images, which have been created after observing stimuli within the original albums. The work therefore questions the truth and gives autonomy to the viewer's own interpretation. Annette Kuhn said memory work undercuts assumptions about the transparency or the authenticity of what is remembered, taking it not as truth, but as evidence of a particular sort. This set of appropriated albums has been the current focus of my work, and for it to be meaningful and for me to take on the role as narrator, I needed to be able to personalise it. Therefore, the unnamed male central to the images became known as Terry. I made a list of his characteristics inferred by repetition throughout the albums. In my album, I use themes and repetition to highlight photographs which are important or reminiscent of an event. In my CRJ, I refer to them as stimuli, as they form the basis of many of my images. The most recurrent theme is that of roses, and the very first image I have used appears 3 times within the set of purchased albums, 2 of them slightly larger reprints. Ironically, I only discovered its duplication after I had chosen it as a source of stimuli. I had tacitly picked up on the importance of this picture. Martha Langford describes the organisation and presentation of photographs as sisters. She notes the repetition of at least 2 images throughout the album and how they are placed as a reminder or a theme rather than chronologically. The feedback I received for my teaser trailer early in the module enabled me to rethink some of the strategies I was using. The references to time were too overt. Instead, I attempted to achieve a sense of timelessness using repetition and contrast and ignoring chronological order. The inclusion of histological artifacts also reinforces the notion of time, as does the inclusion of memorabilia. The themes I have used are the ones I think to be important in the Terry albums. They are included as hooks to entice the viewer's imagination. Beloff states that photographs are not concrete memory, they are hooks on which are caught the real story. The colour red is a mini-theme which runs throughout my work, which is of course directly linked to the roses. In his recent guest lecture, Wilby Ings spoke about the way he connects colour between elements in his film. The wedding photographs I took are the most obvious examples of this, through the rose bouquet, earrings, lipstick and shoes. In the final edit, I decided not to use a photograph with the shoes, as I found it too cliched. Prior to the family album, the family Bible was used to record lives. The more wealthy would be likely to contain family letters and memoirs. Wanting to make my album more than a collection of photographs, I made a set of 25 different postcards which I sent out to 25 contacts. I asked them to return them to me having written something on the back, as per the instructions sent. They were personalised for each recipient. I hoped that people would find them attractive and individual, and therefore be more willing to respond. I also hoped that they might use the pictures on the front for their own stimuli. I asked everyone not to use my own name, but T or Terry. I used sentences from the returned cards as titles for the images in my exhibition, and I used a few of the cards in my dummy book too. Recently visiting an exhibition in Jersey Zoo, I took note of what worked well from the point of view of the visitor. Cases with detailed diaries and cookery books did not allow for much reading in that type of small space. However, the cases containing smaller items were fascinating, allowing me to imagine and reconstruct historical events. I used this information when adding memorabilia to my own book. Pressed roses which had been used in my photographs, a leaflet, menu, postcards and an album tassel were all added. Having read about the donation of a family album to the McCord Museum in Canada and how its items were categorised, I decided to include an inventory in my dummy book. This also allows a viewer to discern what is my work and what is appropriated. Rather ambitiously, I'm aiming for an element of confusion with this work. The truth in one context may be fiction in another, depending on the location or juxtaposition of images. If I use an image of myself by roses, it tells the truth. I know that it actually happened, but as soon as I put it next to Terry, the context changes. Even realising that the photographs were taken at different times, the unknowing viewer might question the link between the two photographs. They do not know what connects them. Independently, these photographs are both evidence, but viewed together on the same page, their displacement creates a falsehood. In this work, I tell Terry's story by stepping into it, and his story partly becomes mine too. Early on in this module, we were asked to create some images using unfamiliar apparatus. I used photographic paper to create photograms. Experimenting with layering, timing, and light, I was able to create images of different tones. The first ones I made were of a man's belongings, followed by the wedding bouquet, which included a string of fake pearls. Later, I experimented by making a stencil from one of my prints, applying squashed blueberries and making a photogram. In others, I applied paint too. My final experiment was by soaking roses in the sea, tucking a piece of photographic paper in between the roses and their cellophane wrapping. Bringing it out of the sea, I laid them on a rock for a while. Looking through the Terry albums, I was particularly interested in a couple of photographs which showed a train crash. I conducted some research using the number of the train. I discovered details of the crash alongside some photographs online which were very similar to Terry's. This information, alongside the numerous other photos of trains he took, confirms that he was a train enthusiast and perhaps even worked on the railways. In some of the images, I take on a performative role, having been inspired by the work of Cindy Sherman, Trish Morrissey, Jeff Wall and Alex Prager. My own work attempts to act out, but in an understated, subtle way. Here are a couple which didn't make the edit. The one on the left is too staged, and I was unable to portray the emotion that I was looking for. A more recent discovery for me has been the work of Sophie Kelly. The pictures I took in my holiday hotel room is a direct reference to her work, although unlike her images, I included myself in this one. Making new images to place alongside the original ones became an ethical challenge. I wanted to portray Terry in a completely positive light, aware of the possibility of someone who knew him seeing it. Gillian Rose thinks that audiences should take moral responsibility for what they see. But I'm not convinced by this premise, as it can't be assumed that the accidental audience will be adequately prepared to take any responsibility. Annette Kuhn says that family photography may affect to show our past, but what we do with them and how we use them is really about today, not yesterday. Trialling different production methodologies recently has enabled me to get to grips with other methods of dissemination which could be useful to my practice. Book production seems the most apt, and the 3 dummy books that I have made have improved each time, having acted on feedback and also seen dummy books of my peers. Once the final book was made, it was challenging working out a way to make it into an appropriate format for submission. Video making is definitely not my strength. I found it necessary to find an additional way to represent my work, which meant sourcing a flatbed scanner. However, I now know how I could present my work if I hope to get a project published in the future. I've made objects that are both virtual and tactile, although it seems to be that my work almost certainly needs to be tactile, or if not, something that can be viewed as a real object as well as online. Going forward, I'd like to see whether I can use family research methods and census records to investigate characters within appropriated albums or photographs, allowing for more realistic fictionalisation. Maybe with nearby Coventry being the UK's next city of culture, I would be able to do such a piece of work based around its history.